Hey Steelers fans, I'm Thomas Mott. Welcome into our Steelers Talk mailbag video. We're going to answer your mailbag questions from our over 3,000 subscribers. First though, if you want to get in on next week's mailbag video, because you didn't get in on this one, go down below, use the hashtag Steelers, ask any question you possibly want regarding your Pittsburgh team, and then I'll go ahead and answer them more than likely in next week's mailbag video. Key factor is, got to be subscribed, because all these questions are from our subscribers, and so to get in on the mailbag video, ask your question, and be a subscriber by hitting that red button down below. All right, let's start with Michael, whose first question says, what non-Steeler quarterback the Steelers have the best chance of getting? I'm assuming you mean for next year, right? Because right now, the quarterback situation is set with Ben and Mason Rudolph and Dwayne Haskins, just how it's going to be. Let's just assume, I guess, that you're talking about if Big Ben retires, then what happens in 2022? So here's the deal. First off, the free agent in quarterbacks in 2022, like the ones that aren't going to be re-signed, like Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson, aren't that great. I was going through the list. These are the 5 best, but best is kind of a soft term here. Like Jameis Winston's going to be a free agent quarterback in 2022. Cam Newton would be a free agent quarterback in 2022. Jacoby Brissett would be interesting. I think he's had a little bit of bright spots during his career with the Colts, but really not that great. Marcus Mariota, way too old, too washed up. And then I guess if you like Taysom Hill, if you're into that, which I'm obviously not, so very simply, the free agent quarterbacks aren't that great. So it'd be more of if you wanted to trade for somebody like a Deshaun Watson, that could make a little bit of sense. But if you want to sign somebody off the street, replace Big Ben, not looking too good. Now, we talked in the past about kind of some of the top quarterbacks in next year's draft, Spencer Rattler, Sam Howell, but most of us assume the Steelers are going to be at least a double-digit win football team, and even if they're a 9-win football team, they're picking in the middle of the first round. So I wanted to go ahead and give you guys the 5 other quarterbacks in the 2022 NFL draft. These are some of the other names that could be there middle of the first round or even as late as second, third, fourth round. We don't really know how good these guys are going to be. Guys like Carson Strong out of Nevada, who hasn't had great competition but has a massive arm. I mean, he is a very, very strong thrower of the football, led the entire college football last year with passes over 50-plus yards. Big wild card in Emory Jones out of Florida. A lot of people think he's going to be great this year, but again, you haven't seen a lot of Emory Jones. There's a big question mark there as well. Matt Corral out of Ole Miss gets a lot of love from people in the YouTube comment sections, but again, it goes to Ole Miss, not necessarily a Heisman frontrunner, let's just say. You got Desmond Ridder at Cincinnati, and of course Brock Purdy out of Iowa State, who has played a lot of games, but a lot of people don't expect him to be a stud quarterback, probably a late draft pick. So there are options to go ahead and get the next Big Ben Roethlisberger, next replacement for Roethlisberger, but it's not going to come in free agency. It'll most likely come in the draft. So there are a couple of names you can throw out there on top of the Spencer Rattlers and Sam Howells of the world that we talked about in a previous video. What do you think about this? Down below, a comment section. Would you rather have Big Ben return in 2022 or start fresh? Type B down below for Ben or type F down below for fresh. I would just say, based on, what happens to Big Ben this year. If he's good this year, then sure, bring him back for one final year if he wants to. If not, then start fresh and begin the rebuild, or at least the quarterback rebuild from the very beginning. All right, Russ Obenstein, I think I said your name, says, Thomas, huge fan of your show. Thank you. How many wins are the Steelers getting this year? I'm in the double digit, but it's not going to be 12 or 13. I think we got to be realistic about what's happening right now in the division and the fact that Vegas doesn't like our chances. Like, Vegas is not a big fan of the Steelers this year. They have the Ravens as the leaders in the clubhouse, and they're the betting odds to go ahead and win the division. Browns are in second place. Remember the Browns-Steelers matchup in the postseason last year. The Steelers are there at plus 440, according to the Las Vegas Superbook, and then the Bengals, of course, are at the very bottom there. I think the thing we got to realize in terms of how many wins the Steelers are going to have, the AFC North is at its peak. This is the best AFC North we've seen in recent history. It might be the best AFC North, since Ben started playing in Pittsburgh. I know there were some pretty darn good years where, Carson Palmer with the Bengals were pretty good, or you go back to the Ray Lewis days whenever they had Joe Flacco win a Super Bowl. Like, there were, at times, there would be one other team that was good, and Baltimore's really been that team against Pittsburgh in the North. But now, with Cleveland being what it is, that's something that's never been the case. Cleveland's always been in the basement. You got to figure the Bengals will be a lot better than they were last year because, I think the young head coach is going to figure things out, and then they get their quarterback back in Joe Burrow. So I think this is a tough year. So when you talk about wins as a whole, you get to 10, you get to 11, and that's a successful year. It all depends on, as we keep talking about, Ben Roethlisberger. But I don't think it's going to be a bad year where they only win 7. But I don't think it's going to be a crazy year where they're going to win 13 or 14. Just not possible playing all of these teams twice every single, at least this season going forward, obviously, in the division. Heatrick24 says, any chance Rudolph could be traded prior to the start of the season? Yes, there is. I think the loser of the Rudolph-Haskins battle is a very good chance of being traded or even cut. Based on the fact that how many people want to keep on a roster. I'll be honest, though. Rudolph versus Haskins is fun. Like, it makes the preseason fun. It gives you something to go ahead and watch during the preseason. Not just, what does Najee Harris look like in limited reps? The two guys who are going to be out there getting the majority of the reps in all 3 preseason games are Mason Rudolph and Dwayne Haskins, battling out for that number 2 spot. If an injury were to happen at some point during training camp for a different team and they desperately need a backup or, probably not a starter, but a backup, for instance, I think the loser of this battle between Rudolph and Haskins is going to go ahead and possibly be traded if they are not cut. I don't see them keeping all three. Like, if Haskins stinks during training camp and he doesn't play well in preseason, he's gone. Like, Rudolph will be the number 2 guy, and that'll be what it has been over the past couple of seasons. So I could see a scenario where you would trade Rudolph if someone really makes a phone call and really wants him, but who really wants to go out and, I guess trade for Mason Rudolph unless you're just that desperate. But we've seen stuff like this before. Like, you remember a couple years ago, a team also in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, they traded their starting quarterback, Sam Bradford, after drafting Carson Wentz like a couple weeks before the season. So anything is possible in terms of quarterbacks being traded. It all depends on injuries. You remember that year was to Minnesota, Teddy Bridgewater, blew out his entire leg. So obviously, we will see. Okay, help us get to 4,000 subs. We already passed across the 3,000 subscriber barrier. We're going for 4,000 and then 5,000 subs here on the channel. So also help us out. You guys like the content here? Latest news, the rumors, the crazy predictions, the mailbag videos, all the stuff that we cover for your Pittsburgh Steelers. Go down below and subscribe to help grow the channel, because the more subscribers we have, the more mailbag questions we'll get, the more mailbags and all the other videos we'll go ahead and do for you guys to watch. All right, let's go jump into 2 more here. Just Win Steel says, where's the hype around Pat Freiermuth? Good question. It's not really there. This was one of the best tight ends, I think, to come out of the NFL draft in recent history. The problem is there was a better one drafted number 4 overall by the Atlanta Falcons, and that, of course, was, Kyle Pitts, who really went ahead and overshadowed Pat, who had a pretty darn good career at Penn State. People consider him, Baby Gronk. That's what they call him, because he wore a similar number. I think he wore 87 at Penn State. What's funny, though, is during the first couple days of practice, Mike Tomlin is really getting on Pat in terms of can he block? And so he literally asks him almost after every single catch, quote, can you block? Because that was the big knock on Pat going into the NFL draft. It was like, can he block? Because we know he can catch, but can he block? Which is kind of a stupid thing, because you don't really care about tight ends blocking right now if you're drafting them to be a pass-catching tight end. You're not sitting there saying, oh, well, how good does Kyle Pitts block? No, it's how good does Kyle Pitts run routes and catch passes and break away from defenders in both the slot and the linebacker position. And Freiermuth had a pretty darn good career at Penn State, even though it wasn't jaw-dropping numbers. In his couple seasons there, he had 92 catches and 1,000 yards, but he had a ton of touchdowns, 16 in total, and expects to be a big red zone threat. I see people talking all the time, is this going to become, could he become the number 1 tight end this year? I don't think so, based on who's currently on that roster, but I do think that, guys are looking at Pat and being like, man, he should have gotten a lot more hype had there not been Kyle Pitts and not been this guy named Najee Harris, who obviously is taking all of the Steeler hype, along with the fact that Big Ben has had a very interesting offseason. So I understand why, the hype is not there. I do agree. I think he's going to be a stud and be, a pretty darn good addition in the future for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's put the over/under at let's go 400 yards for Pat Freiermuth here in the 2021 season. You think over or under for 400 yards? I would say right about that, because rookie tight ends don't normally have crazy good seasons. You just statistically, you look at George Kittle, you look at Travis Kelce, you look at even some of the greats like Rob Gronkowski. None of them have fantastic rookie years. It's about 500 yards is the average. So obviously being behind Ebron, I would put them probably under 400 yards, but right about. Probably, it's going to be a factor this year, but it's the later years, next year, the year after, when you want Pat to go ahead and start producing. We'll do one more here. JDog88 says, who has the most to prove this season? Oh, man. I think the entire offense has pressure. We can sit here and say Big Ben. And Big Ben, I don't think he has to prove anything, but I think he needs to prove that he's going to be good to go for one final year. I think Juju Smith-Schuster is thrown up there right now, because he, of course, had a very iffy, let's just say, up and down season in 2021 and got a lot of controversy and hit with a lot of criticism as well. So he has a lot to prove. I think Najee Harris being the first running back off the board has stuff to prove. The offensive line being very much makeshift and very different from what it was, and which is a staple of the Steeler offense the past couple of years. It's been changed. So everybody has pressure. But, you throw Matt Canada in there in the mix, being the new offensive coordinator. I think the offense has the most pressure out of anybody. And if you want me to give, specifically, I do think Ben is under pressure. But I would say the offensive line's got to figure things out. I really think the offensive line has got to play well in order to keep Big Ben upright and this offense trending in the right direction in order to win games in what we talked about is a very difficult AFC North. All right, ultimate for today here on our Pittsburgh Steelers Talk mailbag. Again, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. That way you can get in on next week's mailbag. And if you have a question that you want to ask, you're dying to know my thoughts on this, go down below, use the hashtag Steelers, and just type your question away. Because whatever you guys type, I normally see in next week's video. I'll pull it, get your name on the screen. It's really fun. And then we'll answer your questions, as many as we can possibly do once a week here on the channel. So, all we have for today, I am Thomas Mott, your host. Enjoy training camp. All those videos are fun, watching Ben throw the ball around. I know the rest of the guys out there, Najee Harris as well. Hopefully they stay safe and healthy. But you guys enjoy the rest of your day.